Chapter 15, Sampling. Many of our preconceived notions about samples and sampling are found in the media. Oftentimes we will see on a news report or on a commercial a report that says a random sample showed thus and such, or 2 of 3 people chose this product. However, most of the time when we see these commercials or when we see these news reports, this doesn't tell us how the samples were chosen. In this chapter, we're going to talk about choosing a sample size that will be adequate, that will allow for your research to be valid. Sampling involves selecting a group of people, events, behaviors, or other elements with which to conduct a study. Sampling theory was developed to determine mathematically the most effective way to acquire a sample that would accurately reflect the population under study. The key concepts of sampling theory are population, elements, sampling criteria, representativeness, sampling errors, randomization, sampling frames, and sampling plans. The population is a particular group of people that have common characteristics that want to be evaluated. The target population is the entire set of individuals who meet the sampling criteria. The elements is a individual unit of the population. An element can be a person, a event, a behavior, or any other single unit of the study. The assessable population is the population that is available to the researcher. The subject or participant or informant are the ones that are involved in the research, which are usually the elements. Generalizing the research means that the findings can be applied to more than just one sample under study, because the same sample is representative of the target population. This slide has a diagram that better explains how the population is broken down to the actual research participants. So you start out on the outside with the big circle of the population, then it narrows down to the target population, and this is determined by the sampling criteria. This is determined by what you want to include within your sample. Accessible population is that set of people that you are wanting to look at that meet your criteria, that are actually accessible to you. The sample is the group that is selected through your sampling method, and we'll talk about those sampling methods here in just a few minutes. And then the subject, the element, the research participant, informant, that is the one individual that is within the sample. Sampling criteria, which is also referred to as eligibility criteria, includes a list of characteristics essential for membership or eligibility into the target population. This will include inclusion sampling criteria and exclusion sampling criteria. And if you look in your book on page 353, near the bottom of the page, there is an example of the TWIST study that, and it talks about how that they identified specific inclusion and exclusion sampling criteria to designate the subjects in the target population precisely. For a sample to be representative, it must be similar to the target population in many ways as possible. It is especially important that the sample be representative in relation to the variables you are studying and to other factors that may influence the study variable. The difference between a sample statistic and population parameter is called the sampling error. A large sampling error means that the sample is not providing a precise picture of the population. It is not representative. Sampling error is usually larger with small samples and decrease as the sample size increases. Sampling error reduces the power of a study or the ability of the statistical analysis conducted to detect differences between groups or to describe relationships among variables. This slide is a graph and demonstrates a sampling error between the population and the sample from the population. Random variation is the expected difference in values that occur when one examines different subjects from the same sample. If the mean is used to describe the sample, the values of individuals in that sample will not all be exactly the same as the sample mean. Systematic variation is a consequence of selecting subjects whose measurement values are different or vary in some specific way from the population. Because the subjects have something in common, their values tend to be similar to the values of others in a sample, but different in some way from the value of the population as a whole. A refusal rate is the number and percentages of subjects who decline to participate in the study. High refusal rates to participate in a study have been linked to individuals with serious physical and emotional illnesses, low socioeconomic status, and weak social network. The higher the refusal rate, the less the sample is representative of the target population. Randomization means that each individual in the population should have a greater than zero opportunity to be selected for the sample. In other words, everyone should have an equal opportunity to be selected for the sample. The method of achieving this opportunity is referred to as random sampling. In experimental studies that use a control group, subjects are randomly selected and randomly assigned to either the control group or the experimental group. The use of the term control group means the group not receiving the treatment. For each person in the target or accessible population to have an opportunity to be selected for the sample, each person in the population must be identified. To accomplish this goal, the researcher must acquire a list of every member of the population through use of the sampling criteria to define membership. This listing of members of the population is referred to as the sampling frame. Probability sampling methods have been developed to ensure some degree of precision in estimations of the population parameters. Probability samples reduce sampling error. The term probability sampling method refers to the fact that every member or element of the population has a probability higher than zero or has equal opportunity for being selected for the sample. Simple random sampling is the most basic of the probability sampling method. To achieve simple random sampling, participants are selected at random from the sampling frame. This goal can be accomplished in various ways. If it is a small study, the names can actually be written on a slip of paper, placed into a container, and then drawn out one at a time until the desired sample size is reached. Another technique is to assign a number to each name in the sampling frame. In large population sets, subjects may already have assigned numbers. For example, numbers are assigned to medical records, organizational memberships, and professional licenses. The researcher can use a computer to select these numbers randomly to obtain a sample. Stratified random sampling is used when the researcher knows some of the variables in the population that are critical to achieving representativeness. Variables commonly used for stratification are age, gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, diagnosis, geographical region, type of institution, type of care provider, and site of care. Cluster sampling is a probability sampling method applied when the population is heterogeneous. It is similar to stratified random sampling, but it takes advantage of the natural cluster of groups of population units that have similar characteristics. Systematic sampling can be conducted when an ordered list of all members of the population is available. For example, if you have a list of the group, you may say that every fifth person on the list will be randomly selected to participate in the study. In non-probability sampling, not every person in the population has an opportunity to be included in the sample. Non-probability sampling methods increase the likelihood of obtaining samples that are not representative of their target population. The 5 non-probability sampling designs that we look at in your textbook are convenient sampling, quota sampling, purposive or purposeful sampling, network or snowball sampling, and theoretical sampling. Convenient sampling is just what it says, convenient. In convenient sampling, subjects are included in the study because they happen to be in the right place at the right time. Quota sampling uses a convenient sampling technique with an added feature. It has a strategy in place to ensure the inclusion of subject types in a population that are likely to be underrepresented in the convenient sample. Some examples would be women, minority groups, elderly adults, poor people, rich people, and undereducated adults. In purposive, I apologize that I'm stumbling over this word. In this sort of sampling, the researcher consciously selects certain participants, events, or incidents to include in the study. Network sampling takes advantage of social networks and the fact that friends tend to have characteristics in common. When you have found a few participants with the necessary criteria, you can ask for their assistance in getting in touch with others with similar characteristics. Theoretical sampling is usually applied in grounded theory research to advance the development of a selected theory throughout the research process. The researcher gathers data from any individual or group that can provide relevant data for theory generation. The data are considered relevant if they include information that generates, delimits, and saturates the theoretical codes in the study needed for theory generation. In quantitative research, power is the capacity of the study to detect differences or relationships that actually exist in the population. In quantitative studies, effect is the presence of a phenomenon. We have already talked some about the different types of studies, but one thing I did want to draw your attention to are the confirmatory and exploratory studies. Confirmatory studies are expected to have large samples and are used to be used with random sampling techniques. Exploratory studies are not intended for generalization to large populations, but they are designed to increase the knowledge of the field of study. As the number of variables under the study grows, the needed sample size may also increase. Well-developed instruments measure phenomena with precision. Data analysis techniques vary in their ability to detect differences in the data. Statisticians refer to this as the power of the statistical analysis. For data analysis, it's important to choose the most powerful statistical test appropriate to the data. Qualitative research is conducted to gain insights and discover meaning about a particular experience, situation, cultural element, or historical event. The intent is an in-depth understanding of a purposefully selected sample and not the generalization of findings from a randomly selected sample to a target population. The research setting is the location where a study is conducted. A natural setting is an uncontrolled real-life situation or environment. A partially controlled setting is an environment that the researcher manipulates or modifies in some way. A highly controlled setting is an artificially constructed environment developed for the sole purpose of conducting research, such as a laboratory. After a research team makes a decision about the size of the sample, the next step is to develop a plan for recruiting research participants, which involves identifying, assessing, and communicating with potential study participants who are representative of the target population. Recruitment strategies differ depending on the type of study, population, and setting. Also important is retaining research participants that are involved in the study. Retaining research participant involves the participants or subjects completing the required behaviors of the study to its conclusion. The problem with retaining participants increases as the data collection period lengthens. Please refer to page 379 and 380 in your text for more key points on Chapter 15.